An Islamic State suicide blast targets police recruits in southern Yemen. Why has Spain become a promised land for gay Moroccans? And Ukraine rejoices as Russia cries foul. Why has this year's Eurovision winning song created so much controversy? Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. For the second day in a row, a bombing attack has rocked Yemen. In the southern city of Mukalla Monday, a suicide bomber blew himself up at a security headquarters, killing and wounding several people. On Sunday, a deadly attack also killed dozens of police recruits in the same city. At least 25 new police recruits were killed on Sunday when a suicide bomber detonated his device inside a police compound. Islamic State terrorists have claimed responsibility for the attack. Medical and security sources in the area say the victims were queuing up to register when the bomb was exploded. Mukalla was a hub for Al-Qaeda activities before the militant group was pushed out in April in an offensive by Yemeni troops backed by a Saudi-led coalition. Now, for the latest on the security situation in Yemen, reporter Zaid Ali joins me on the phone from Sana'a. Good evening, Zaid. Hello, Zaid. Zaid, do you hear me? All right, looks like we're having some trouble there with Zaid. Moving elsewhere, in a major announcement Monday, the United States and other world powers say they're ready to supply Libya's internationally recognized government with weapons to counter Islamic State terrorists and other militant groups gaining footholds in lawless regions of the country. Now, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and top officials from more than 20 other nations are meeting in Vienna, discussing ways to help strengthen Libya's fledgling government. Before Monday's talk, Secretary Kerry met with Jordanian Foreign Minister Nasser Jude, and he also met with Italian Foreign Minister Paolo Gentiloni. The two diplomats are co-hosting the security session aimed at supporting the government of national accord that Western powers hope can unite Libya. The internationally recognized government is facing challenges from several rival factions. The new government is also being challenged by Islamic State-affiliated militants who have established a base in the central city of Sirte. The militants have used that base to launch attacks in neighboring Tunisia. For more on the summit, reporter Kerry Skyring joins me on the phone from Vienna. Kerry, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you.
Now, what a challenge here. This is a country that seems to need a lot of help. How significant is this pronouncement by the leaders today?
It's quite significant for Libya and quite significant particularly for its unity government because John Kerry was standing beside the Libyan unity government prime minister as he made these commitments today. And the major commitment was one of getting the UN arms embargo lifted and of getting more aid to Libya. So all of that was going on there today, and a very significant commitment with, of course, other Security Council members present in the meetings today, and of course also present were about 20 countries from the region.
And of course, we know that it's not just about stabilizing the government in Libya, but it's that this government is coming up against multiple challenges, including the most sophisticated terrorist group, ISIS, right?
Yes, and it was noticeable that John Kerry emphasized that the reason they're moving towards providing arms to the Libyan government is what he said was the emerging and very direct threat from ISIS to Libya. And he specifically emphasized the ISIS threat as a justification for this move to provide the arms. It is a gamble, of course, because there is no unity in Libya at the moment. The so-called unity government has not really achieved that. In fact, as early as last week, the United States was sanctioning one of its members for failing to cooperate with the government. There is a lot of disunity to be overcome before there is unity within Libya.
Now, we know that the process has come with a lot of frustration over many months now. What are you hearing? Do people feel like finally there is almost a sense of hope for Libya?
There's certainly a commitment. Whether that translates into action and hope for Libya, to a large extent will depend on Libya's leaders. And this point was also stressed by the Secretary of State, saying that it's Libya's leaders, through overcoming their differences, right from the government through tribal leaders and faction leaders, to achieve that unity that will lead Libya out of the chaos. So he's stressing quite a bit of responsibility to Libya's leaders to make their own unity with the help of the international community.
Well, Kerry, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, Kerry Skyring reporting from Vienna, Austria. Now, multinational forces fighting the Islamic Boko Haram terrorists arrested 5 of the group's leaders and freed dozens of captive women and children earlier this month. The news came as several West African leaders, French President François Hollande, and top British and American diplomats gathered at a summit in the Nigerian capital of Abuja to discuss regional security and strategies to fight Boko Haram.
Je veux vraiment mettre en valeur ce que nous venons de décider lors de ce sommet à Abuja.
So I very much like to emphasize what we just decided. We are facing an enemy which, yes, has suffered some setbacks. They remain extremely dangerous given that they are using weapons of war or suicide attack, and we therefore have to strengthen our intelligence mechanism, and France will fully play its role.
The only fear we had was when Boko Haram claimed loyalty to ISIS. Frankly, up to now, we don't have firm intelligence of what ISIS has been able to send to Boko Haram in terms of weapons or even money. But the fact that they say they are loyal to them, it's safer for us to assume ISIS could send them some support in military hardware and maybe some money.
President Buhari estimates that his country needs about $1 billion to help development in the Lake Chad region in order to eradicate the causes that spread terrorism. Now, the leaders agreed that a global approach is needed to defeat Boko Haram with both soft and hard power. Still in Nigeria, the army there says it has arrested members of a militant group which had claimed responsibility for a wave of attacks on pipelines in the Delta region. Now, the detainees are thought to be part of the Niger Delta Avengers, a movement blamed for assaults on oil infrastructure. The attacks are blamed for the drop in Nigeria's oil output from 2.2 million barrels a day at the start of the year to the current 1.65 million barrels a day. The Avengers allege they are fighting for a greater share of oil profits, an end to pollution, and independence from the swampy southern region. Last week, they warned oil firms to leave before the end of the month. Well, I want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover during the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa54, and check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince Makori. Now, coming up, LGBT Africans find a safe haven in Spain. Stay with us.
I wanted to present music and a side of American culture that is most important to me, that is a part of who I am. They're going to get some incredible performances. That's one of the things I love, bringing these artists in so you can get to see them do what they do. It's soul music, and that's what music is. It's that which comes from the soul.
Well, in business news, crude oil prices have reached their best levels of 2016 in recent weeks. Africa 54 business correspondent Jill Malandrino in New York met with Jamie Baker of Baker Botts to discuss supply and demand fundamentals.
crude oil inventory continues to build and the Saudis are actually dialing up production. Jamie, why do you think that we're seeing an increase in oil prices? Because they really have recovered since the February 11th low.
Well, they've certainly moved quite a bit since February. I think that in some degree the movement is attributable to trading contracts that were expiring in the late February, early March period, and so people were having to cover their short positions. I don't think outside of the trading community anyone ever thought oil would get below $30. And so much of that bounce, I think, relates to financial considerations rather than supply and demand considerations. But another thing that I think is driving this is I think a lot of the significant producers are driven by their political considerations as much as they are by economic considerations, and so they are not responding to forces in the marketplace necessarily as they are thinking about how to achieve their political or strategic objectives.
Now, in the United States, going into the summer season, it's considered more high demand as more Americans are driving. Do you think that at this point demand may outpace supply?
I think demand will increase, and I think it'll come into better balance. But I don't think that those curves are likely to intersect globally. At least they won't be likely to intersect this year. The EIA is suggesting that inventories will continue to accrue at about the million barrel a day rate through the end of this year and into the first quarter of 17. Having said that, I think you will see some movement in price. Some of this is momentum driven, and some of it relates to increasing demand, whether it's in China or the first quarter traditionally is a slow quarter for the U.S. economy, and so I think that there will be some demand driven growth in the price curve.
And what about from $45 to $50? Is that the appropriate level based on supply and demand right now, or do you think it should be trading higher?
Well, that's kind of a speculative question, but I think that if you survey many of the experts who are following this very closely, the one-year projections are in the $50 range. So I think that for this to move from $45 to $50 is still a 10% move, but it's not out of the realm of possibility.
Well, it's just like when we talk about stocks. Stocks don't have to go up forever. There's really no reason that oil should have to be at $60, $70, $75 a barrel. If this is the appropriate level based on supply and demand fundamentals, then this is where it should be.
Well, sure, that's true, but you've got to take into account the effect of inflation. I mean, at $35 a barrel or $45 a barrel, the 1973 equivalent is something like $2.50 a barrel. So I think that you're right that prices don't necessarily need to go up, but they are really at pretty low levels historically speaking, inflation adjusted.
Okay, thank you very much, Jamie.
Thank you.
For the Voice of America in New York, I'm Jill Malandrino.
Welcome back. Now, for many years, the Spanish enclave of Melilla has represented a golden opportunity for African migrants to escape the poverty or persecution of their homelands. But in recent months, Moroccan gay asylum seekers have become the largest group of refugees in the city. Adeline Bellalou went to meet them and recounts their escape.
At the Center for Immigrants' Temporary Stay in Melilla, authorities are recently receiving considerable number of requests for asylum from Morocco. Of the 73 Moroccans who have sought asylum so far this year, most have done so for their sexual orientation. I am 24 years old. I come from Morocco. I left Morocco and applied for asylum because I am gay. As we know, homosexuals are rejected and hated by everybody in Morocco because of culture and religion. I ask for peace, for a country that will host me and accept me for who I am, where I can be myself without thinking about what others think. Article 489 of the Moroccan Penal Code punishes homosexuality by up to 3 years in jail. Human rights groups claim that cases such as the one that occurred in Beni Mellal last March, where a court condemned 2 homosexuals after being beaten up by youth who broke into their home, are proof of persecution that suffers the Moroccan LGBT community.
It is true that the Moroccan government further tightened the law and the way to handle this issue. What happened lately in Beni Mellal is quite extreme, because even if it's true that homosexuality is publicly denied in Morocco, it's way less usual that someone violates a person's privacy and penetrates into the privacy of the home.
Many Moroccans welcome in the center claim to have suffered both physical harassment and verbal, in addition to sexual abuse. None of them give its name or real origin. They reject all media inquiries, fearful of consequences.
I understand their fear. It's even more than fear. They are thrown into panic at the repression they may suffer, either themselves or their own family who remained in Morocco. There are serious cases of stabbing, and in some cases we are talking of people who risk their lives for being homosexuals.
To be recognized as a refugee, applicants have to convince decision-makers of the genuineness of their sexual orientation. Because of the challenges of obtaining evidence, a great deal of weight rests ultimately on verbal testimony. I had an interview at the border, and I talked about my story from the beginning to the end, about violence and everything. After a while, I brought them evidences about what I was saying to prove it's not just stories but reality. There are people here who threaten to commit suicide. They prefer to die here rather than go back to Morocco. As application on the ground of homosexuality from Moroccans is expected to continue breaking records, Spanish authorities have decided to slow down the process in January over suspicion of fraudulent claims. Adeline Bayol for VOA Melilla.
Well, in Kenya, poetry and spoken word are a popular means for addressing everything from love to political violence. Lenny Rovaga in Nairobi reports from the monthly open mic night at the Kwani Trust, a 13-year-old literary network that brings together some of the brightest voices on the continent.
24-year-old Sam Muremi is the quintessential entrepreneur. He and his sister run a bakery out of their home. But pastries are not his only passion. He writes poems during his breaks. By night, he takes to the stage under his alter ego, X.
You are here. A construct called consciousness.
Muremi has been performing his verses around Nairobi for the past 4 years. It's an art form known here as flowetry, poetry with rhythm. Muremi tackles love and politics.
Poetry transcends boundaries because the human experience is the same, different variations. And poetry captures these variations and is what is used to connect us as a people.
There are now open mic nights around Nairobi for floets like Muremi. Ayub Kairigo, who goes by the moniker Flo Flanny, has been a poet for more than 5 years.
The drum rolls are calling me home. The drum rolls are calling me home. So I want to pack my bags and go back in time. Way back before the attack. Forget Biggie and Pac. I'm talking way back when Black was king. Back when our lifestyle was simplicity, our villages were simply cities.
Fans say they love the performer's no-holds-barred approach.
No topic is off limit. You can say anything from sexuality, you can tell anything from political, anything from social justice, anything cultural, you can say. There is nothing that's limited in poetry.
The Kwani Trust holds this monthly open mic night. Acclaimed Kenyan writer Binyavanga Wainaina started the literary network in 2003 to develop writers. Angela Washuka is the executive director.
We see ourselves as a site for public memory. When the post-election violence happened several years ago, for example, we produced quite a lot of work interrogating the beginning ideas of this, interrogating the idea that there are certain cultures or certain tribes or certain identities that are more legitimate than others, interrogating the idea of that we're one national body, which is not something that we find to be healthy in any realm when it comes to creative expression.
And the open mic nights are a chance to do just that, to explore and challenge society. Lenny Ruvaga for VOA News, Nairobi.
Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54, we'll tell you about the Ugandan community radio stations that have a unique way of broadcasting. We'll be right back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. In Nigeria, supporters of a movement to create a separate Biafran state for the Igbo people in the southeast say they have been victimized by security forces at protests. Talks between Senegal and Gambia to resolve a 3-month border dispute postponed until July, despite shortages of essential daily items. In Angola, a yellow fever outbreak further taxes already ailing national health system in a country with the world's highest infant mortality rate. Former coup leader Azali Assoumani is elected as president of Comoros, according to provisional results. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. Big celebrations in Ukraine, but in Russia, not so much. Ukraine's Eurovision entry, Jamala, won big in Stockholm with a powerful tribute to her Tatar people's deportation from Russian annexed Crimea in 1944, while Russian officials complained of bias. Now, the winning song, 1944, opens with a line, "When strangers are coming, they come to your house, they kill you all and say, we're not guilty, not guilty." Those memories have been revived by Russia's seizure of Crimea several weeks after a pro-EU revolt ousted Ukraine's Moscow-based president in February 2014. Russian lawmakers on Sunday lashed out at ex-rival Ukraine's political victory in the Eurovision Song Contest, as one pro-Kremlin paper insisted Moscow's entrant was robbed. Next up, robots really are taking over. Now, a robot monk sharing Buddhist teachings has recently become popular on social media networks in China. The robot was developed by Longquan Temple in Beijing. It can respond to voice commands and answers simple questions about the teachings of Buddhism. The robot was designed to help people connected to external material temptations rather than their inner being. And the monk behind the creation of the robot regards it as a modern means for spreading the teachings of Buddha, such as being indifferent to fame and wealth. Well, and finally, should the continent be worried? You don't have to go to Kenya or Namibia to go on safari. The first phase of the Al Ain African Safari Park in the United Arab Emirates is now open for business. Now, the park features more than 10 species of African animals. The safari director says the goal is not only to have a safari experience in the UAE, but also to raise awareness of conservation issues. Now, the park covers an area of 217 hectares and is estimated to be one of the world's largest man-made safaris. And that is what is trending today. Now, innovation is happening across Africa in many different sectors, from agriculture to banking, education to energy, and in broadcasting. In Uganda, Rutio community radio stations or radio in a bucket are broadcasting without a studio or transmitting tower. VOA's Paul Ndiho tells us more.
9-6. Humility is what describes Judah Mukundani, a Ugandan software developer and technology enthusiast. He is the inventor of a grassroots community radio station dubbed the Rutio Project, or Radio in a Bucket. Among his peers, he's just a regular guy. In fact, very few people know about his innovation that is creating a buzz on the international scene. Mukundane is part of a young breed of African innovators trying to change Africa's image. His love and passion for technology inspired him to build from scratch a grassroots community radio station.
I'm into technology for the grassroots, and the kinds of projects that I'm working on or that interest me are projects that try to reduce technology to a level where people at the grassroots are able to take it and apply it to their life. One of the projects I worked on was the mobile VRS project, and this was basically enabling people at the grassroots to register newborn babies using just their mobile phones and USSD technology that they're used to. They would send in basic information, and that information would be used to print certificates for newborn babies in real time. And that's been rolled out in Uganda, it's being rolled out in Mozambique. And then that brought me to the Rotio project, which I'm working on at the moment.
Mukundane is part of a talented group of young people tasked to find homegrown solutions for people living in rural villages.
Rotio is a project where we build very small, community-based low-power FM radio stations. These radio stations are small enough to fit in a bucket. We've basically taken out all the expensive equipment, but put a mobile phone and an FM transmitter in a bucket, and so that plays audio content that's broadcast out to the communities, and people receive them using their normal radio receivers. They don't need any specialized applications or smartphones. It's the normal radios that they're using at the moment.
Rotio grew out of the recognition that despite the wonders of mobile telephones and the internet, radio is still a vibrant medium in many places across Africa. It is still where most people get the bulk of their information. It doesn't require literacy, a personal device, or much power. It is transmitted free of charge, and it comes built in many of the phones used around the world.
The idea is that these radio stations should be owned by the people who depend a lot on radio, so that they do not feel like they are left out by mainstream radio at the moment.
Technology analysts say Rotio stations are designed to best serve rural citizens and bridge the gap between communities and the currently available commercial stations, which are located within the business centers, hindering access. Jude Mukundane says the Rotio project has had some successes as well as many challenges.
It was a challenge because we were proposing radio at a scale that the UCC is not used to licensing. Typical radio stations are about 1 kilowatt. Our stations run at a maximum of 25 watts. So that's nothing compared to a typical radio station.
The Uganda Communications Commission recently licensed Rotio community radio stations to run pilots in northern Uganda, up to a radius of about 35 kilometers on flat terrain areas. Paul Ndiho, VOA News.
Well, that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight, at 1800 UTC, and in the mornings today, Break Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC. That's Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching. Have a good night.
Welcome to the Voice of America's News Words.
Does this word mean something good has happened?
Unleashed. The president is sending Secretary of State John Kerry to the Middle East to help build a coalition to defeat the militants who have unleashed a wave of violence that has included attacks on Iraq's Christians and other minority communities, and recently the videotaped killing of American journalist James Foley.
Unleashed means to let something very powerful happen quickly.
It is like taking a leash off a dog and letting it attack someone. In our story, the militants unleashed or set off a wave of violence.
Usually, unleashed does not mean something good.
So, the next time you hear the word unleashed, you will know what this news word means.